In this video, we'll look at fluent speech for the phrase couldn't've. We typically don't say could not have. Could and not contract to couldn't, but often in speech we reduce this even further. The ha of have gets dropped and we say couldn't've, couldn't've. Listen to these examples.
I mean, we couldn't have been more wrong. 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 I mean, we couldn't have been more wrong.
I couldn't have known then that I would. 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 I couldn't have known then that I would.
That doesn't mean we couldn't have rearranged the schedule in some other ways. That doesn't mean we couldn't have rearranged the schedule. That doesn't mean we couldn't have rearranged the. That doesn't mean we couldn't have rearranged the schedule. That doesn't mean we couldn't have rearranged the schedule in some other ways.
Couldn't have had a better colleague that day or since. Couldn't have had a better colleague that day or since. Couldn't have had a better colleague that day or since. Couldn't have had a better colleague that day or since. Couldn't have had a better colleague that day or since.
It couldn't have survived any longer than that. 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 It couldn't have survived any longer than that.
Couldn't have adapted. Couldn't have adapted. Couldn't have adapted. Couldn't have adapted. Couldn't have adapted.
That couldn't have been more different than that. Couldn't have been more different. That couldn't have been more different. That couldn't have been more different. That couldn't have been more different than that.
Couldn't've gets further reduced and we drop the v sound. That sounds like coulddinuh, coulddinuh. Let's listen to some examples.
Couldn't have convinced anybody. Couldn't have convinced anybody. Couldn't have convinced anybody. Couldn't have convinced anybody. Couldn't have convinced anybody.
And they couldn't have cared less. 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 And they couldn't have cared less.
He just couldn't have been more helpful. 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 He just couldn't have been more helpful.
With a life jacket, which I couldn't have done before, 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 with a life jacket, which I couldn't have done before.
For more practice on fluent speech, check out this playlist.